Right, Yella, can you please talk to me about your company, Cirra AI, and the original pain point that caused you to create it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are automating the administration of Salesforce and down the road other enterprise applications. So the pain point that triggered this is I've been working with Salesforce for 15 years or so, and I see a lot of time-consuming, expensive projects just to get relatively minor things built into the platform, as well as very high ongoing costs just keeping things running. And a lot of that time is spent doing very mundane things, clicking buttons, configuring screens, etc. AI can do a really great job of automating a lot of that. So that's what is the genesis of Cirra AI. We're taking all the grunt work off the plate of Salesforce admins and revenue operations leaders and whoever might be kind of day to day in charge of the Salesforce platform, freeing up their time so that they can focus on really advancing their business objectives rather than clicking through setup screens in Salesforce.
Every AI tool today claims it connects to Salesforce, but 99% of them just pull data queries. You built Cirra AI to actually alter org metadata, flows, fields, permission sets, and page layouts. From an architectural standpoint, why is making changes inside a legacy enterprise CRM like Salesforce so much harder than just querying it?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of very important to get it right when you make changes into the platform. It's one thing to get some information and make decisions based on that. You still have kind of a human judgment there, and nothing is actually being changed in the system. But if you're making changes directly, you have to make sure you do it right, that you respect the access rights of the users, that you don't make sensitive changes where they shouldn't be made, and walk people through the complexities of configuring their org in a structured way. Rather than just kind of relying on them to know what to do in the first place. Kind of you have to guide them through the process because even experienced people may not remember all the intricacies of where things are in the platform, and having an experienced and a skillful AI to guide you is the best combination of human and AI support.
You connect models like Cloud, ChatGPT, and Cursor to Salesforce through a single MCP server. Can you just walk us through that pipeline? When a user prompts Cloud, what happens, and how does your AI translate that natural language into precise metadata API?
Right. So Claude and other MCP compatible AIs, which include ChatGPT and Cursor and now Gemini also. They have access to a set of tools that are exposed through MCP. These tools come with descriptions, so they do the reasoning based on what the user wants to do and find the right tool to do that. Then the actual changes to the Salesforce org are made through our MCP server. So the AI decides what the parameters are, which tool to call, and then we execute that. And on top of that, if something goes wrong, as in if the AI gets a parameter name wrong or there's some value that is not allowed for this particular tool call, we'll return clear error messages to the AI so that it can adjust. So there's this kind of dance going on between the AI trying to make changes, the MCP server giving feedback as to either it was successful or it wasn't. And if it wasn't successful, giving some guidance on what might be the reason for it, so that the AI can be very effective at making its changes. And on top of that, we have a library of what's called skills, which are essentially guidelines again for the AI to perform common tasks in Salesforce. So those will also guide the AI client to making the right decisions and calling the right tools. So we've kind of gone through a bunch of typical changes that people want to make in their org. Wrote up documentation to guide the AI client to effectively use the tool so that there's less back and forth, that things are done more efficiently, following best practices. We will validate also that those best practices are followed. So that, for instance, if you're creating some automation like a flow, that you don't hard code things in there, that you don't, that you make sure to handle any kind of error messages that might, or error situations that might occur in that flow, which, if you're just doing it kind of naively, you might bypass all of that and you build very brittle systems. But if you're following the best practices, then you're more likely to develop something that is robust and will not error out when you deploy it to your users.
So enterprise admins are terrified of an LLM hallucinating and deleting something. So how do you make sure that there are guardrails so that it prevents that?
Yeah, so several ways around that. First of all, anything that that the AI client can do through an MCP server is routed through a Salesforce user, so it will never be able to do anything that Salesforce user would not be able to do manually in the Salesforce UI. So you can set, and should set restrictions at that level. Secondly, when you're making changes in terms of the configuration of the org, the best practice is to do that in a Salesforce sandbox environment, and we definitely recommend that people do that also. Using AI, which is exactly the same process they would follow if they were doing it manually, except just faster and easier. So if you're doing it in a sandbox, then you're never actually interfering with production systems until you've had a chance to test it. Lastly, we have additional guardrails that we apply on top of the permissions granted from Salesforce to, for instance, prevent any business data getting exposed to the LLM in a production environment. So if you're working in a very sensitive situation, healthcare, financial services, where you absolutely don't want your Salesforce data exposed to an LLM, you can lock that down at the Cirra AI level, so that no matter what the user requests, they will not be able to see this information, and it won't be fed into the LLM.
So how do you think that your background helped you make Cirra AI? Like what unique perspectives did it give you that someone else wouldn't have was trying to do this?
Well, two elements to it. One is this is my second startup in the Salesforce ecosystem, so I've kind of gone through the whole process of building a company, making it available to Salesforce customers, understanding what their concerns and wishes are. That helps to streamline things quite a bit. Secondly, doing that previous company, I saw a lot of different customers from rather small to very large, Fortune 500 companies, and their challenges in configuring and keeping Salesforce running. So pretty deep expertise at the actual Salesforce level, and also the configuration of Salesforce specifically.
So you bootstrapped a business to 7-figure ARR in the Salesforce ecosystem during over a 13-year run, working with Fortune 500 companies. So what are the architectural landmines inside legacy Salesforce orgs that you know by heart, which a 22-year-old founder at Y Combinator is going to miss?
So one key thing is that those orgs, the Salesforce orgs, have evolved over many years often. So it's really hard to know what you can safely touch without breaking something. And then very often even the people in charge of the org no longer know that, because it was built by some previous consultant. So it's important to really map out what you're planning to do and go through a very thorough testing process with customers, especially in those larger, more complex orgs. Scalability is very important. So it's quite easy sometimes to hack something up and deploy a quick fix, but you have to take into account how is this going to work when you actually deploy to thousands of users versus in your sandbox everything might work nicely with one or two test users. The data quality, you can't assume that things are are set up and that the data is clean, that relationships that you might expect to exist actually exist in real production data. So you have to be very defensive and careful about thinking about all the paths that might happen and all the different combinations of data that might appear, and validations that might prevent you from making certain changes that you think should be okay. But so bottom line is think defensively about what you're building, try to think through all the possible ways it can fail, and then handle those gracefully, rather than just hoping for the best when you deploy it to a bigger org.
So you published a framework detailing 6 stages of AI adoption in Salesforce, moving from basic QA answering to background agents and autonomous event response. Where are most enterprise teams stuck right now, and what technical hurdles keeps them from moving to background execution?
So I think many teams, and this is kind of hard, easy to miss if you're in Silicon Valley and kind of very focused on AI on a day-to-day basis, and everybody around you is also in that ecosystem. You kind of overestimate where people are in terms of their AI adoption and even knowledge of what is possible. So I think many teams are still in the ask AI questions step, where they're not even really using AI to make any real changes. So I was recently at a customer, and having a conversation with them about a flow that they wanted to improve in Salesforce, and in parallel kind of translating their input into comments and questions to Claude. So it was kind of building the thing as I was having the conversation with the customer. And that that was quite surprising to them that was possible. So people are really not there yet. So more generally, I think the whole AI industry is kind of in a place of really applying AI to real problems and applying it end to end. The models are more than smart enough that's not the bottleneck at the moment. The bottleneck is really, okay, how do you take an entire process that is still quite heavily human dominated, and how do you really integrate AI into that process very pragmatically, but also effectively. And that's where the challenge is. So I think that's where most people are. Then once you've done that, even in a semi-manual way, you can start to move to automation. But that's still kind of a pipe dream for most.
So Salesforce is, like you said earlier, is infamous for hidden platform quirks, half-finished flows, legacy custom objects, and weird governor limits. How does Cirra AI feed that specific org context into the LLM window so it doesn't try to build idealized code that fails deployment?
Yeah, so there's 2 sides to that. One, before building anything, the AI can actually do kind of a survey of what's there. And it will usually do that by itself, but you can also explicitly prompt it to look carefully at what exists. So that will take care of some of the landmines. Still, inevitably, just like if you were doing it manually, you will find some things after you've actually deployed the first version, either user interface or user experience limitations, or suboptimal user experience that you might want to fine tune. What is great is that the AI can keep a running document of all the decisions that were made, what the implementation was. So it's not just a tool to help you build something, it's also very much a tool to document what was built and why it was built that way. So that makes it way easier to iterate incrementally once the first version is live. You don't have to go back and revisit why a certain decision was made, why did we build it this way. It's all there, and the tool can kind of remind you of those decisions, so that it becomes way faster to iterate. So you can really have this interactive conversation with the customer, You don't have to go away and say, okay, let me go build this for 2 days and I'll come back and show you something. You can kind of iterate through that pretty much in real time or very close to real time.
And then so Salesforce is right now is heavily pushing its own native Agentforce suite. Why is an open MCP layer that lets developers use Cloud, Cursor, or ChatGPT superior to staying strictly inside Salesforce's walled garden?
Yeah, so the Agentforce platform is really meant for deploying agents that perform tasks for end users. So it can be, supporting, providing support services, a chatbot to help people resolve support issues. It can be tools related to empowering the sales team. The core audience of Salesforce, both the Sales Cloud and the Service Cloud, it's really not that focused on the admin experience and the configuration experience. There's some perfunctory MCP server built into the platform, but it doesn't allow you to make any changes to the platform via MCP. It's read only as it comes to configuration data. And even then, even for accessing regular data, it's kind of clunky because it only works on one org at a time. You have to keep, reconfiguring it if you want to talk to a different org. So it's really not meant for the admin experience so much. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that things are moving so fast in the AI world. There's all these, automation harnesses coming up that allow you to do things on a regular basis. So, for instance, let's say take lead assignment. If you have a relatively simple Salesforce org, you could try to hard code the lead assignment or use some of the basic lead assignment tools in Salesforce or even a third-party application. But you could also use an AI harness to automate that without doing any coding really. But that only works outside of the Salesforce environment. So all the advances in AI, you can really only make use of them if you work with your Salesforce org remotely in a kind of a headless way, which is ironically kind of also what they themselves are pushing through the Headless 360 initiative. So it kind of aligns very neatly with that Salesforce positioning. Staying inside the Salesforce tooling kind of very much does not. That kind of forces you into the UI inside of Salesforce, which is historically not like people's favorite aspect of the platform, let's say.
And then so obviously due to your deep experience, what do you think like the long-term technical moat for Cirra AI is as frontier models natively get better at API orchestration? There's always a fear that like you get squeezed. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for us also, we are moving into more of the autonomous automation. This is something that we haven't released yet, but we will pretty soon, to actually not just be a tool for admins, but to be a team member that can support admins and in smaller orgs directly the revenue operations or business operations teams. So you'll be able to assign a task to your AI admin. It would go through that task, if necessary, prepare a list of questions, but for simpler tasks, just execute it, rather than you piloting the interaction through a chat. You assign the task gets done, and then you can move on to more interesting work as a Salesforce admin or a business operations leader. So moving further up that autonomy up that autonomy stack. That's our goal, and that's what we're working on right now.
So, all right, I'm not an expert on this. I'm trying my best, but so I just have a couple questions. I might ask them in a wrong way or whatever. But isn't like Salesforce essentially getting squeezed because they have to sell like seats, which is why kind of they're trying to keep Agentforce as a closed kind of thing. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because like if they open it too much, then they kind of cannibalize SaaS, like the SaaS apocalypse. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very much an open an open question for as to how they navigate that transition. I mean, obviously Salesforce has a huge installed base, and they have a very sticky platform for many companies. Um, where it's not just the CRM, it's not just the service organization, but like everything is tied into Salesforce, and they have the system of record for a good chunk of the data. So it's not like it's definitely not easy to just kind of rip and replace Salesforce in many cases. Um, down the road where their core value is, I think, is in in that data structure, in the permissions, the which are very fine grained and very powerful if complex. It's the automation on top of the data structures, and it will be also in safely and scalably deploying AI solutions on top of that data structure. I think where what will go away, and again, the Headless 360 initiative is kind of acknowledging that, is the Salesforce user interface per se. So more and more people will be interacting with Salesforce through Slack, through other means, through AI clients, or through tools yet to be developed. So that user interface, I think, is going to be less and less powerful, or less and less critical to the platform. But the data structures and all the automation and permission structure around that, and the integrations with other platforms, is going to be a strong moat for them. So whether or not Agentforce succeeds, or whether people build agents on other platforms interacting with that data, I think that is very much up in the air. Obviously Salesforce is historically very focused on trust and safety of data. So that is potentially a key differentiator. You can, of course, you can easily deploy solutions on top of Salesforce and not follow the and then expose data inadvertently, or build insecure solutions if you don't take that seriously. And Salesforce always does take it seriously. So for many enterprise buyers, that might be compelling, because they have a trust relationship with Salesforce, and they are somewhat confident that that will be built in a safe way. For smaller companies, or more kind of forward-looking, more open to new technologies companies, they might prefer to just use Salesforce as the core data repository, and build the actual AI solutions outside, where it'll be easier to take advantage of the latest and greatest tools.
And then I have so so Salesforce is explicitly building Agentforce to protect their. This is sort of halfway the same question I asked, but it's different. Salesforce is explicitly building Agentforce to protect their seat revenue and stop third-party models from turning them into a so-called dumb database. By building an open MCP bridge with Cirra AI, aren't you essentially helping developers bypass Salesforce's $2 per action tax? How do you think Benioff's team views third-party MCP servers like yourself?
Well, I mean, they obviously built their own MCP server, so they recognize the value of MCP as a protocol, and they do recognize the value of being open to integrations. I believe that they are getting ready to charge for their MCP server, so that might be interesting. I think Salesforce historically has been quite partner oriented, and is kind of looking to the partner ecosystem to show the way in terms of innovation. and then if things work, they will follow down that path and either acquire or build their own. I think I don't know what the pricing strategy for Salesforce down the road will be. It's possible that they might start to charge for API access at some level. Would not be surprised at that. If people are really using their database as as a component in bigger infrastructures or bigger architectures. I think in general, kind of everybody's trying to figure out how this is going to work, right? And Salesforce is betting on or trying out many things in parallel. I think historically they've sometimes been too eager to build their own version of everything and not go with the wider ecosystem, and sometimes they belatedly come back from that, like they tried to build Chatter internally as a chat solution, and then ultimately end up buying Slack to fill that same role. They've built this Agentforce Vibes, vibe coding tool, which seems like doomed to fail against the Claude code and similar solutions. So similarly with MCP, I think they've built their own, but they will probably end up surfing or allowing more ecosystem focused solutions for that. I mean, they already allow that, but that will be a better solution rather than trying to build the MCP servers in house.
Okay, Jelle, for the last question, what would you like to communicate to potential customers that they might not understand or know about Cirra AI, if you could just like to tell them something?
Yep. So integrating Salesforce into your AI client is both simple and challenging at the same time. It's simple at a superficial level. It's challenging to actually use that integration productively in your Salesforce admin work. We're a partner that can help you bridge the gap. We start with a simple solution, but we can help you get productive with that as well. So reach out to us if you want to turn your Salesforce admin workflows into fully AI enabled and AI powered workflows.